Let's start at the beginning with insulin. This hormone, produced by the pancreas, often gets misunderstood or overlooked in conversations about health, yet it plays one of the most essential roles in the body. If you think of your body as a high-performance machine, insulin is the operator of the fuel system. It decides where the energy from your food goes and how it's stored or used. And the moment that system starts to malfunction, the entire engine starts breaking down in ways you may not even feel until it's too late. So what exactly does insulin do? Imagine you've just eaten a meal. Maybe it's a sandwich or a bowl of rice or a banana. These foods contain carbohydrates, which your body breaks down into glucose, sugar that enters your bloodstream. Glucose is a primary fuel source, especially for your muscles and your brain, but it can't just sit in your blood. High levels of glucose floating around for too long can damage tissues, nerves, and organs. That's where insulin steps in. It's like a key. Its job is to unlock the doors to your cells, especially in the liver, muscles, and fat, so that glucose can go inside and be used for energy or stored for later. When this process works smoothly, blood sugar stays balanced, energy levels remain stable, and your metabolism hums quietly in the background, doing its job. But here's the deeper layer. Insulin doesn't just manage energy, it also sends messages to your body about whether it's time to store or burn fat. It tells your liver how to function, your muscles how to grow, and your brain how to respond to hunger. It's like a conductor of a metabolic orchestra, synchronizing multiple systems that influence your weight, mood, focus, and overall vitality. Now you might be thinking, if insulin is so helpful, why is it talked about like the villain in metabolic health? The truth is, insulin itself isn't the problem. The problem arises when we bombard our bodies with more sugar and starch than we need, meal after meal, snack after snack, day after day. The pancreas keeps producing insulin to manage all that excess sugar, but over time, the cells stop responding. They become numb, resistant. This is what we call insulin resistance, a condition where the key still exists, but the locks have changed. The doors stay shut, and glucose starts piling up in the bloodstream. At first, your body compensates by producing even more insulin, trying to force the sugar into the cells. And for a while it works. You might not feel any different. Maybe you're a little more tired than usual. Maybe your appetite feels out of control, but nothing dramatic, not yet. Then slowly, silently, the imbalance grows. That elevated insulin keeps signaling your body to store fat, especially around the belly. It blocks your ability to burn fat for energy. It triggers inflammation. It affects your brain, making you crave more sugar and starch. And eventually the system starts to fray, leading to pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and even cognitive decline. But let me say something important here. None of this happens overnight, and none of it is irreversible. That's the empowering part, because insulin resistance doesn't suddenly strike, it builds. And that means we can catch it, reverse it, and even prevent it entirely by understanding insulin's true role in our bodies. To do that, we have to stop viewing our bodies as problems to be fixed and start seeing them as conversations waiting to be heard. When your body gains weight easily, crashes after meals, or craves sugar all the time, it's not betraying you, it's speaking to you. It's telling you something is off, that the system is overloaded, that insulin, once a quiet helper, is now waving a red flag. When you begin to honor that message and respond by changing how you eat, when you eat, and how you live, you reconnect with your body's natural intelligence. You give insulin a chance to reset its rhythm, and that one shift, that one understanding can change everything. So before we dive deeper into causes and solutions, just let this truth land. Insulin is not your enemy. It's a messenger, a guide, a deeply intelligent part of you that wants to keep you alive, balanced, and well. But like any messenger, can only do its job if we learn to listen. Because when we stop listening, disease begins. But when we start listening deeply, consistently, compassionately, healing begins. And that is where your transformation starts, right here, right now, with awareness now. That we understand what insulin is and how it works as a messenger of balance in the body. We need to talk about what happens when that message stops getting through. Insulin resistance is not a moment. It's a process, subtle, gradual, and often invisible until its effects are deeply rooted in your system. And the irony is, this breakdown doesn't begin in a hospital or with a lab test. It begins in your daily routine, what you eat, how you move, how you cope with stress, and how connected you are to your own body signals. Insulin resistance happens when your cells stop responding properly to insulin signals. It's like someone turning down the volume on your body's internal communication. The pancreas, noticing that the cells aren't opening their doors to sugar, begins to work harder. It releases more insulin to try to force the issue. For a while this works. Blood sugar levels stay somewhat normal because insulin levels are rising in the background, but this isn't balance. It's compensation. And every compensation in the body comes at a cost. The first signs are easy to miss. You might feel more tired after eating or need snacks more frequently just to keep going. Maybe you notice you're gaining weight more easily, especially around the midsection. You may feel more irritable or anxious if you go too long without food. These aren't random. They are metabolic whispers, warnings that the system is under stress. But in today's fast-pacing world, we often override those signals with caffeine, sugar, and distraction. We push through the fatigue, we normalize the weight gain, we medicate the anxiety, and the body continues adapting, all the while falling deeper into imbalance. The trouble is, insulin resistance is not just a sugar problem. It's a system-wide communication breakdown. When insulin is elevated for long periods of time, it begins to affect how your body stores fat, how your liver processes nutrients, and even how your brain handles neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. It's no coincidence that insulin resistance is strongly linked to depression, anxiety, and even Alzheimer's disease, which some researchers have begun calling type 3 diabetes. Now, let's take a step back and look at this from a higher perspective. What we're really talking about here is the loss of metabolic flexibility. The body loses its ability to shift smoothly between using glucose and fat for fuel. Instead, it becomes stuck in glucose dependence. You crave sugar not just because of willpower issues, but because your cells are crying out for energy they can't access. That's why you can feel both exhausted and restless at the same time. You can be overweight and undernourished. It's not about eating too much. It's about your cells not getting what they need. And here's the most sobering part. This pattern can go on for years before your fasting blood sugar ever becomes abnormal. That's why so many people are walking around with insulin resistance and don't even know it. The traditional medical system often waits until the damage is advanced before naming it. But by the time you're told you're pre-diabetic or diabetic, insulin resistance has likely been progressing silently for a decade or more. But there's hope in that timeline, because what develops over time can be reversed over time. If we catch it, if we understand it, and if we're willing to make real, sustainable changes, not just dietary changes, but changes in mindset. Because this isn't just about numbers on a chart. It's about how connected you are to your body's feedback system, how deeply you respect the signals it sends you, and how consistently you respond to them. There is a deeper wisdom here, something I think we often overlook. The body doesn't make mistakes, it adapts. Insulin resistance is your body's way of protecting you from chronically high blood sugar. It's doing its best with what you're giving it. So the goal isn't to fight your body, it's to support it, to remove the overload, to restore the sensitivity, to rebuild the trust between signal and response. That begins with awareness. You can't heal what you don't understand. Now, once you do understand, once you really see what's happening behind the scenes, you're empowered. You're not a victim of your metabolism, you're a participant in it. You influence it every time you eat, move, rest, or even think. The body is always listening, and when you start speaking the right language, when you stop flooding it with sugar, when you start moving in ways that activate your muscle and calm your nervous system, it begins to open back up. The doors start to unlock. The cells begin to listen again. And when that happens, everything changes. Energy returns, cravings fade, mood stabilizes, fat starts to melt away, not because you're punishing your body, but because you're finally working with it. So don't wait for a diagnosis, don't wait for a crisis. The signals are already there. The body is already speaking. The question is, are you ready to hear it? Because the sooner you listen, the sooner you heal. If insulin resistance is a result of the body gradually tuning out insulin signals, then we have to ask, what exactly causes the body to go deaf in the first place? The answer is as complex as it is sobering, because it's not just one thing. It's a pattern, a rhythm of living that over time pushes the body past its capacity to maintain balance. And in our modern world, that rhythm is almost always too fast, too artificial, and too disconnected from what the human body evolved to handle. Let's start with the most obvious culprit, sugar. Not just sugar in your coffee or soda, but the hidden sugars in everything from salad dressings to granola bars to so-called healthy yogurts. It's the refined carbs that break down quickly into glucose. White bread, white rice, pasta, pastries, crackers. Our bodies were never meant to handle this constant influx of quick-burning fuel. Think about it. Evolutionarily, sugar was a rare treat, something found in ripe fruits or honey during specific seasons. Now it's everywhere, every day, in almost every packaged product on the shelves. When we consume sugar or refined carbs, our blood glucose spikes. The pancreas responds with a surge of insulin to pull that sugar into the cells. But if that cycle repeats over and over, 3, 4, 5 times a day, plus snacks and late night indulgences, the cells become overwhelmed. They start ignoring insulin's signal, and the body compensates by producing even more insulin. It's like shouting louder and louder in a noisy room. Eventually, everyone just stops listening. But sugar alone isn't the full story. Stress plays a powerful, unappreciated role. When you're stressed, whether it's from work, relationships, financial worries, or even just constant digital stimulation, your body releases cortisol. Cortisol tells your liver to release stored glucose into the bloodstream. Why? Because it thinks you're in danger and need energy to fight or flee. This made sense when stress meant running from a predator. But today, most of our stress is chronic, not physical, and the glucose goes unused. Yet, your body keeps producing it. And insulin keeps rising in response. And just like with sugar, this eventually leads to resistance. Then there's the third player in this metabolic drama, inactivity. We've engineered movement out of our lives. We drive instead of walk. We sit all day at desks, in cars, in front of screens. Our muscles, which are designed to soak up glucose, sit idle. When you don't use your muscles, your body has fewer places to put the sugar. That sugar stays in the blood and insulin levels rise again. But this time, the problem isn't what you're eating, it's what you're not doing. You're not moving enough to make space for the energy your body's trying to process. All of these, sugar, stress, and sedentary living, create a feedback loop. One feeds the next. You eat sugar, which causes a crash, which makes you feel tired, so you skip exercise. Then you get stressed about not feeling good, and you reach for more sugar to cope. It's a cycle. And it doesn't just affect your waistline or your blood work, it affects your mind. Elevated insulin and blood sugar swings affect your mood, your sleep, your focus. They hijack your ability to make clear decisions, to feel calm, to feel like yourself. But here's the deeper insight. Insulin resistance is a reflection of disconnection. Disconnection from real food. Disconnection from natural rhythms of activity and rest. Disconnection from our own biology, which is quietly trying to tell us that something isn't working. We've been trained to override that wisdom with convenience, with speed, with comfort foods, with numbing routines. But The body doesn't lie. It always responds to the truth of your habits, not your intentions. The good news is that this disconnection is reversible, but not through a quick fix or magic supplement. It begins by rewiring your relationship with the basics: food, movement, and emotion. It means reaching for whole foods instead of processed ones, not out of guilt, but because you understand what your body actually needs. It means carving out time to walk, not just to burn calories, but to wake up your muscles and reconnect with your breath. It means acknowledging stress, not burying it, and learning to discharge it through deep breathing, creative expression, or quiet reflection. Insulin resistance doesn't come from one bad meal. It comes from patterns. And that means the reversal is also in patterns. Small, consistent choices, eating less sugar, walking daily, sleeping better, breathing deeply, add up over time to restore insulin sensitivity. You're not fixing something broken, you're returning to something natural. That's the mindset shift. Insulin resistance is not a flaw in your body, it's a feedback mechanism. A teacher, and like all wise teachers, it becomes louder when ignored. But it's never too late to listen. Because every bite you take, every step you walk, every stressful moment you meet with presence instead of panic, that's your body's cue to begin healing. Not in some distant future, but in the moment you choose differently. And that moment can be now. If insulin resistance is a problem of energy overload and communication breakdown, then muscle, skeletal muscle specifically, is one of the most powerful tools we have to restore balance, and yet we rarely think of muscle as a metabolic organ. We think of it in terms of appearance or strength, but muscle isn't just something you use to lift things or sculpt your body. It's one of the most insulin-sensitive tissues in your entire body. It listens, and when you train it properly, it listens even more closely. Here's what's remarkable. Over 70% of the glucose circulating in your bloodstream after a meal is taken up by your skeletal muscle. It's your metabolic sponge, your blood sugar filter. So the more lean muscle mass you have and the more you use that muscle, the more efficiently your body handles glucose. You reduce the burden on insulin. You lower the frequency and intensity of those hormonal spikes. You make it easier for your body to stay in balance. But it's not just about quantity of muscle, it's about activation. You don't need to become a bodybuilder to reverse insulin resistance. What you need is movement that is regular, intentional, and challenging. Resistance training, even with just your own body weight, increases insulin sensitivity dramatically. Even a single session of weight-bearing exercise can make your cells more responsive to insulin for up to 24 to 48 hours. That's how powerful this signal is. And yet most people don't think of building muscle as a health imperative, especially as they age. They think of it as something optional, aesthetic, even vain. But I want to challenge that. Because muscle loss, what we call sarcopenia, is one of the most dangerous age conditions. It doesn't just make you weaker, it makes you more insulin resistant, more inflamed, more metabolically fragile. Your muscles are your body's most accessible pharmacy. When you engage them, they release myokines, chemical messengers that reduce inflammation, improve immune function, and even support brain health. Movement becomes medicine, quite literally. And this isn't a poetic metaphor. This is biochemical reality. There's also a psychological layer to this. Movement reminds the body of its purpose. It reconnects you to a primal rhythm that modern life often erases. In our seated, screen-based, overstimulated world, it's easy to forget that our bodies were designed for action, not just for performance, but for survival, for repair, for communication with the internal systems that regulate energy, hunger, focus, and mood. When we stop moving, we not only lose muscle, we lose connection, we become passive observers of our own decline. But when we reclaim movement, even in simple ways, walking after meals, doing short strength workouts, stretching in the morning, we reignite a spark of physiological intelligence. The body remembers, the muscles respond, and the cells begin to hear insulin's whisper again. Now let's zoom out. If you've been listening carefully, you'll notice a pattern. Insulin resistance isn't just about what's broken, it's about what's missing. Real food, deep sleep, restorative movement, these aren't exotic interventions, they're human fundamentals, and muscle is a cornerstone of those fundamentals, not just for glucose disposal, but for dignity, mobility, confidence, and independence as we age. Let's take a moment here to reflect. What kind of future are you building for your body when you skip movement? When you ignore that daily opportunity to activate your muscles, you're not just missing a workout, you're missing a signal. A chance to tell your body, I still need you. I still care. I'm still in this with you. That's what muscle engagement becomes. A declaration of participation in your own health. There's also something philosophically rich about muscle. It's not given, it's earned. You don't inherit it. You develop it through consistent effort, struggle, and recovery. It mirrors life. It teaches you that growth isn't comfortable. It's adaptive. It teaches you that pain, when used wisely, can lead to strength. That tension, when managed properly, builds resilience. These lessons don't stay in the gym. They move into your mindset. They change how you face stress, how you respond to obstacles, how you carry yourself through uncertainty. And all the while, beneath that psychological and emotional growth, your cells are adapting. Your glucose is stabilizing. Your insulin is quieting down. Not because you fought the body, but because you've re-engaged with it. You've respected the ancient language of motion and translated it into modern healing. So if you're serious about reversing insulin resistance, if you're ready to restore sensitivity at the deepest level, don't underestimate the role of muscle. Not for vanity, not for numbers on a scale, but for function, for freedom, and for longevity. Because when you move your body with purpose, you move your health in the right direction. And in a world where stillness is easy and sickness is common, movement is a revolutionary act. If we've talked about food, stress, and muscle as key players in insulin resistance, then we have to talk about something that's often overlooked, but just as critical. Sleep. Not just the number of hours you log in bed, but the quality of that sleep. The depth, the rhythm, the consistency. Because sleep, like insulin, is a master regulator. When sleep goes wrong, everything downstream suffers. Hormones, appetite, blood sugar, metabolism, memory, and even your emotional resilience. Now let's look at this from a biochemical lens. When you don't sleep well, especially if you're chronically sleep deprived or your sleep is fragmented, two major things happen. First, your insulin sensitivity drops. Your cells literally become more insulin resistant after just one bad night of sleep. That means the same meal you might handle well after good rest suddenly spikes your blood sugar more the next day. Second, your cortisol, the stress hormone, rises. Cortisol interferes with insulin signaling and raises blood sugar levels on its own. So even without eating more sugar, your body is creating a state of metabolic chaos. But the story goes deeper. Lack of sleep doesn't just damage your insulin response directly, it changes your behavior. Studies show that when people are sleep deprived, they crave more refined carbs, more sugary snacks, and they're less likely to make healthy food choices. Why? Because sleep is not just rest, it's regulation. It regulates the hormones leptin and ghrelin, which control hunger and satiety. Without good sleep, your on-full signals get quiet, and your unhungry signals get louder. You're not imagining those cravings the next day. They're real. Your body is looking for fast fuel because it didn't have the time it needed to restore and rebalance overnight. So poor sleep becomes both a cause and consequence of insulin resistance. You sleep poorly, your blood sugar control worsens, you eat poorly, you move less, and the cycle repeats. And if you add stress to the mix, which often goes hand in hand with insomnia or irregular sleep schedules, you're looking at a perfect storm. Let's step back and consider how far we drifted from our natural sleep patterns. We were designed to align with the sun. Our hormones evolved with the rhythms of light and dark. But today we live in a 24/7 culture. Blue light from screens late at night, constant stimulation, caffeine in the afternoon, overscheduling, under-recovery. We've trained our bodies to stay alert when they should be winding down. We've taught our minds that it's normal to fall asleep while scrolling or to wake up to the buzz of notifications. But the body keeps score. It doesn't forget to skip deep sleep cycles or the irregular bedtime. Over time, this shows up not just in your mood or energy, but in your metabolic health. That stubborn belly fat, those crashing afternoon slumps, the rising blood sugar. It's not just what you're eating, it's also how you're sleeping. And here's the truth most people miss. No supplement, no exercise routine, no perfect diet can fully compensate for chronic sleep deprivation. You can be eating well and moving daily, but if you're not sleeping, your body is still under metabolic stress. Sleep is where your cells clean up the mess. It's when your brain detoxifies, when your liver regenerates, when your hormones reset. Sleep is not a luxury, it's a biological requirement, just like oxygen or water. And if you're trying to reverse insulin resistance, you have to treat it that way. You have to protect your sleep the same way you protect your diet. But this isn't just about getting 8 hours. It's about restorative sleep, deep, unbroken, rhythmic sleep that starts with a consistent bedtime. It continues with a screen-free wind-down period. It's supported by a cool, dark room, by minimizing alcohol and caffeine late in the day, and by honoring the signals of fatigue rather than overriding them with stimulation. And there's something deeply philosophical here. When we don't sleep, when we resist rest, we're often resisting something deeper, slowing down, releasing control, letting go of the day, trusting that things can wait. But healing requires surrender. And sleep is the daily practice of surrendering to your own biological wisdom. It's not laziness, it's wisdom. So I want you to think of sleep not as passive downtime, but as active recovery, as metabolic repair, as a vote you cast each night in favor of insulin sensitivity, emotional resilience, and long-term vitality. Because the truth is, you can't heal in a body that's constantly exhausted. And you can't reverse insulin resistance if you don't respect the rhythm of restoration. So tonight, when the day winds down, let your body rest without guilt. Because deep sleep doesn't just restore your energy, it restores your ability to listen, respond, and heal. There's one more piece we need to talk about, and it might be the most underestimated factor in reversing insulin resistance: mindset. We often approach health from a place of control, macros, steps, blood sugar reading, supplements, and yes, those things matter. But if you've ever found yourself doing everything right and still not seeing change, it's time to zoom out. Because your thoughts, your beliefs, your inner dialogue, they don't just influence your motivation, they shape your biology. We know now from a growing body of science that stress isn't just an emotional experience, it's a physiological one. When you live in a state of chronic worry, when you feel overwhelmed, when you believe your efforts are futile or that change isn't possible, your nervous system goes into a state of fight or flight. That isn't just a metaphor, it's a hormonal event. Cortisol rises, blood sugar rises, insulin rises. Your body is preparing for a crisis, even if that crisis is only in your mind. And here's the irony. Many people trying to improve their health are living in that internal crisis. They're stressed about their food, stressed about their weight, stressed about not doing enough. Every bite becomes a battle. Every skipped workout becomes a moral failure. And that stress, the self-judgment, the shame, the perfectionism, it works directly against their healing. So let's flip the script. What if healing from insulin resistance isn't just about removing the wrong foods or adding the right ones, but also about changing the narrative? What if the story you tell yourself matters just as much as the protocol you follow? That's not just wishful thinking. That's neuroscience. That's psychoneuroimmunology. That's the field of mind-body medicine that shows us our thoughts can change our chemistry. When you shift from fear to understanding, from frustration to compassion, you activate a very different internal environment. You move from survival mode into healing mode. Your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest state, comes online. Digestion improves, sleep deepens, inflammation drops. You make better decisions, not because you're trying harder, but because you're thinking more clearly. You're calm, you're connected. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine two people eating the same healthy meal. One is relaxed, grateful, eating slowly. The other is anxious, rushed, criticizing themselves with every bite. The food is the same, but the biological response is different. The first person is likely to digest and absorb nutrients more effectively with less blood sugar variability. The second might experience more inflammation, more insulin resistance, even from a clean meal. That's how powerful your mental state is. Now, I'm not saying you can meditate your way out of insulin resistance, but I am saying that you cannot separate the mind from the body. You are not a machine. You are a system, a whole, interconnected, dynamic system. And healing happens when the system is aligned. That means your thoughts, your emotions, your beliefs have to be part of the conversation. This is why sustainable change doesn't come from willpower. It comes from identity. When you begin to see yourself not as someone trying to fix a broken body, but as someone learning to listen, to respect, to support a wise and adaptive body, that's when momentum builds. That's when your actions feel less like punishment and more like partnership. There's also a deeper layer here, philosophical, even spiritual. Insulin resistance, like many chronic conditions, can be an invitation. A wake-up call, not just to change your diet, but to reevaluate your relationship with yourself. Have you been ignoring your needs, pushing your body to its limit while trying to meet everyone else's expectations, using food or busyness to numb discomfort? These patterns don't just affect your health, they are your health. So maybe part of the healing journey is about forgiveness, letting go of the blame, recognizing that insulin resistance isn't a failure, it's feedback. Your body didn't betray you, it adapted to years of imbalance, doing its best to keep you safe. And now it's asking for your attention, not your punishment. This doesn't mean you don't take action. It means you take action from a different place. A place of curiosity, not criticism. A place of compassion, not control. That shift in mindset is subtle, but it's transformative, because when you stop fighting your body, you free up energy to support it. When you stop fearing the process, you create space for real change. So as you move forward, whether that means adjusting your meals, walking more, prioritizing sleep, or simply pausing for a deep breath, bring your mindset with you. Not the mindset of discipline alone, but the mindset of care, of trust, of patience. Because your body has always been listening, and now it's your turn to truly hear it. Change doesn't start with what's on your plate, it starts with what you believe is possible.